The end of Reconstruction. Conclusion of Reconstruction. The deal between President Hayes and Southern Democrats settled the end of Reconstruction. Support for radical Republicans declined when the people forgot about the Civil War and focused on their lives. Grant's administration's scandals played a crucial role. He appointed his friends to his cabinet, and they got involved in corruption issues. This resulted in the Northern's loss of faith in Republicans and their politics. Republican opponents began to regain the South state by state, undermining the rights of African Americans. Terror campaigns by secret societies were a factor in restoring their power. By 1877, Republicans had lost all Southern states. The end of Reconstruction takes place with the election of 1876, an agreement between Republicans and Democrats granted the presidency to Republican Rutherford B. Hayes. In order to become president, he privately negotiated the end of Reconstruction with the Democrats. African Americans lose their rights. The laws approved by Southern states after Reconstruction caused African Americans to lose most of their rights. Southern whites used a variety of techniques to limit the civil and political rights of African Americans. The poll tax and a literacy test limited the right to vote for many African Americans. At the same time, the grandfather clause allowed illiterate white males to vote. Segregation laws separated whites from African Americans in every aspect of public activity. The separate but equal rule kept African Americans segregated until 1950. In the Plessy v. Ferguson case, the court ruled in favor of a Louisiana law requiring segregated railroad cars. The court said the law could require separate facilities as long as they were equal. The cycle of poverty. Freedmen peasants were forced to take a role in a cycle of poverty almost impossible to escape from and very similar to slavery. Many African Americans and poor whites owned nothing more than the clothes they wore. This situation forced them to become sharecroppers. A sharecropper is a person who works the land for the owner in exchange for a share of a crop. The landlord offered a place to sleep, tools, seed, and food on credit. The landlord determined how much went to the sharecropper. Most of the time, sharecroppers could not cover what they owed to the landlord with their crops, and ended up owing more each time. Thus, they were caught into a cycle of debt. As in the countryside, opportunities dwindled for African Americans in the cities. They only found jobs inside the African American community. Industrial growth. By the 1880s, the South had developed industrial resources, creating a new South. South's economy began to recover during Reconstruction. Agriculture was the first branch to recover. Cotton revived its production levels, and land was designated for tobacco production. Southern investors began to expand their industries to turn raw materials into finished products. The textile industry came to play an important role in Southern economy. The South began to develop a proprietary resources using iron, timber, and oil. Southern leaders took great pride in the region's progress, a new South that was no longer dependent on King Cotton. An industrial age was beginning, though the North was still far more industrialized. Acts on Reconstruction. During Reconstruction, several acts were adopted to improve the lives of Americans. The Morrill Land Grant Act of 1862, signed into law by Abraham Lincoln, proposed to give federal land to every state to build at least one college accessible to all that would promote regional development by teaching agriculture and engineering. These land-grant universities are considered forerunners of today's state universities. The Dawes Act of 1887 authorized the President of the United States to survey American Indian land and divide it into allotments for individual Indians. Those who accepted allotments and lived separately from the tribe would be granted United States citizenship. The stated objective was to stimulate assimilation of Indians into mainstream American society. A Homestead Act was a law passed by President Lincoln in May 1862 that offered up to 160 acres of public land to any head of a family who paid a registration fee, lived on the land for 5 years, and cultivated it or built on it. This law helped to settle the West.